Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone and welcome to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from NARM, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome back to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast. Have you ever wondered about the quality of the air you breathe in your own home? From allergens to pollutants, the air inside our homes can impact our health and well-being in significant ways, yet it is far too often overlooked. So to shed light on this, we are joined by Senior Lecturer Mary Myla Andamon from RMIT University, which just so happens to be my alma mater. With a background in architecture, her current teaching disciplines are building performance and energy efficiency, building science, as well as construction planning and design. Hi Myla, it's great to have you here with us today. How are you going?
Good. Thank you, Marie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So before we get started, I'm really curious to know, what's the most common misconception you've heard about air quality in homes?
Misconception. Well, air quality in homes, it's really more about how air basically circulate in homes. And more often than not, we associate air quality with how our homes smell, or basically the scent or the odor in our homes.
Yeah, so it's definitely far more than that.
It goes beyond that because our activities are basically the one that conditions our space within our homes.
I'd love to learn more about that. But before we go further into detail, I'd love to get to know you better. Okay. So without further ado, this is Have You Met Myla? And the first thing I want to ask you is, what do you like to do in your spare time?
My spare time?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I like to read. I like to watch films, listen to music, and I do Lego.
Lego, tell us more about that.
The Lego, it's very relaxing. It's expensive, but it does take my mind off things if I do one. And it depending on the kind of set that I assemble or I build, because I like several themes. It does help when, especially we have too much work to do, and I just take a time off, like even say 4 hours just to build one.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who are Lego collectors themselves, but what kind of sets do you normally go for? What usually catches your eye?
The architecture sets, I love those, and the Star Wars sets. You can never have enough Star Wars sets. But I like also their technique sets. When they put together those race cars, or sometimes even just the small ones like the Speed Champions. Mm-hmm. But generally, I favor the architecture and a Star Wars set.
Yeah, and do you have a designated spot to display these sets in your home?
There's always limited space, but I do have a couple of shelves that basically have that. I mean, most of my friends, when they assemble, they sometimes disassemble them and store them again. But for me, no. So as soon as I assemble them, I want them to be basically displayed.
Yeah, that's all of your hard work. I could never imagine disassembling it and putting it all back together again. That's like redoing a puzzle piece.
Oh, yeah, some of them, especially the big ones, I think. But for me, as soon as I assemble them, it stays there as well.
Yeah, for sure. Any plans to make a designated space for it, or?
I would need space. I would need a room for it. I mean, some of my friends have their own specific room for their sets. I don't think I can afford to have a space just dedicated for the Lego set.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Completely. If I could make a designated space for all of the hobbies that I have, I would actually run myself into so much debt.
Yes. And the thing with Lego sets, we talk about air quality in homes. It's a dust collector as well.
So how do you clear the dust on your Lego sets?
Oh, just with a makeup brush, because basically every so often you just have to dust them off
Yeah.
and make sure that they're not near the windows because the UV of the sun and from the windows, it somehow discolors basic, especially the light colored bricks.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest curses of open shelving, which can look so nice.
But yeah.
But even with like display cases, they collect dust just as easily. They're just not as finicky, I guess, to dust, right?
Oh, but I don't like it to be in display case because I want to touch it. That's the thing. Sometimes you move the positions, for example, or this looks nicely this way. So I keep it open. So I just basically deal with it at once every so often. Part of your cleaning, you get to dust them.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible hobby that I unfortunately do not have the time to get into. I literally bought like it's not really Lego, it's I guess knockoff Lego, but I did get one of those sets. It was just like a ginger cat. Oh, I think it was a tiger actually. It was for the year of the tiger.
Yep.
That came out during Lunar New Year last year, and I was so excited about it. I
And
was
you
like,
built it.
"Oh, this is my spirit animal." I'm going to build it. I got it and I haven't touched it since. I maybe looked at a couple of pieces of the blogs and I just haven't had the time. So what's your process with building Lego sets?
Well, it depends. If it's just want a quick break, you get one of those small ones that the ones for 6-year-old or 7-year-old, and you could easily build them in 30 minutes. Yeah, but then if I want really an involved one, I get one of the serious sets, and sometimes a serious set because I only can do it say at night or after work. Depends on how I pace myself. Sometimes I've built a set basically in 4 weeks because I only do it at night or when I had the chance or the time. It's essentially to get off, thinking about something else rather than work.
Yeah, it's
Or-
a therapeutic kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it does. It is relaxing.
Yeah.
So I guess so.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun hobby you have there. But you did mention that you like to watch films and read books. So, what are some of your favorites at the moment?
Which one, films or books?
Either one.
Well, for films, it's everywhere now. You could easily stream a movie, right? So but some good movies I still prefer to watch them in the cinema. And I think the last one I saw was Oppenheimer. That was a good one. It was long, 3 hours, but it was a good one. And I think the last one, a good one, sit down that I watched streaming was and this one was fun. Migration. Have you seen it?
Oh no, I have not. What is it about?
It's an animation. It was a family of ducks. It was wonderful. It's heartwarming.
Yeah.
It's about a family of having to go south, but then had the adventure while they were going south. But it's a fun movie.
That's adorable. I love ducks. I'm gonna have to check it out. My partner's like really, really into film. So he's always giving me film recommendations and making me watch films. So I'm very surprised and actually, frankly, quite disappointed that I have not heard about this yet. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it just came out last year. Usually they bring out these good movies or animation or otherwise, usually around Christmas, right, or Thanksgiving, in the U.S. But I didn't catch it in the cinema, but I think I was just too late in watching that one. But I saw it in one of those streaming services. It was fun.
Yeah. And with Oppenheimer, that is such an incredible film. Definitely makes all the difference in IMAX as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was hesitant at first. I knew I like the actors who were all in the film, but I said 3 hours. And to think it's about the story about the Manhattan Project. How long what kind of a movie would it be? But I was surprised that it was fast paced. So it was pretty good. And so it was, well worth the money spent to go to, because it's expensive now to watch cinema, but it was pretty good.
No, yeah. I don't keep very up to date either with a lot of these things. So that's fair enough. But with books, what are some of your favorites that you have? Are there any genres that you tend to lean into?
Well, my readings tend to be say with three types. Like there's one for work, like when you read a lot of those books, or basically business, for journals that you need for my work, both for my teaching and for my research. But I also like nonfiction, because nonfiction somehow informs you about what's happening in the world or something. So I like Bill Bryson. So I think the last two books that I read with Bill Bryson was At Home. So the history of our private lives. That was pretty good because it gives you a history of how we use our homes and how our homes came about. And there's also, I haven't finished that one yet, but The Body. So basically the story of our bodies and how to put together. The first chapter was riveting because it says, how can you put together a Benedict Cumberbatch? Cheaply.
Excuse me?
Yeah. So he basically boiled it down to different parts of the human body. And then he even had a price for it. And I think just to put together Benedict Cumberbatch, it could be about what? I'm not sure now if it's £97,000 or it was cheap. I mean, good thing it's a human body.
As far as Benedict Cumberbatch goes, yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't finished that one. But it's interesting, basically, how Bill Bryson has a very good way of boiling down science into a very funny read.
Yeah, I haven't read any of his books or works yet, but they definitely sound like interesting reads, and there's a lot to discuss and think about when it comes to the history of our home lives. There's so many aspects to it. There used to be a time where being wed is essentially a rite of passage into adulthood, where everyone did it, and everyone got married at a very, very young age. And so wedding presents, or like wedding registries were kind of necessitated because they were for young adults moving from their parents' homes into completely new homes. Whereas now the wedding registry is something that's not as necessary. So many aspects you talk about there. It definitely sounds interesting. What were some of the biggest highlights for you with that book?
Which one? The At Home?
Yeah.
It's learning how specific rooms actually came about. I mean, admittedly, Bill Bryson is an American, but he basically lived in the UK. How basically terminologies, even salt and pepper, the grinder, how it came about, or for example, the dining table, why the dining table is termed that way. So it's little snippets, basically, of the different parts of the homes on how, admittedly, it's from a very, very Western Hemisphere orientation. But it does make sense.
Yeah, completely. And I feel like, whether or not it's from the Western point of view, and with mostly Western culture, I feel like most of us know enough about Western culture to kind of be able to apply it to our other cultures as well. Even if it's not entirely applicable, we can see where the line is being drawn, and we can where the connections are being drawn. Sorry. So that sounds like an incredible read.
It is. It's a fun read, and it's not so how do you say, taxing. That you're not the way he writes. He doesn't actually bombard you with so much information. It's short and sweet, but you get the full grasp of things.
I love that. I really admire a writer that can do that, because I just ramble all the time and I struggle to keep things concise. So a writer who can do that is really admirable. So thanks for sharing about that. I'm really excited to check it out myself. But as far as your role models go, is there anyone in your life, either professionally or personally, that you look up to?
That's usually a tough one, because it depends. Like I look at some of the or basically researchers who work in my area, and I kind of look up to what I really find admirable how they work on things. Like there's this researcher in America, in the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So His name is Dr. Andrew Persily. So he happens to be also the editor-in-chief of one of the journals that we normally publish in. But I always find his work like amazing. Like I mean, it seems to be like garden variety, but when you look at it and when you read it, you said, how did he come up with this one? Why did he think of it that way? It seems so simple, and yet he came up with it. And there's also a researcher in the UK that I like her work. So, and her work is obviously on ventilation. Her name's Professor Catherine Noakes. I mean, most of these people basically just got highlighted because of COVID, right? But I mean, even before that, I've been following their work already. But it's just amazing how can they come up with a different bent, even if it's scientific or very technical. But they come up with a very different perspective in looking at it.
Yeah.
But in terms of working, I guess our model is I guess my PhD supervisor in University of Adelaide. I mean, he's retired now, but the way, I mean, probably shouldn't say this here in public thing, but he's not I always call him very cantankerous. Like he could be very grumpy, but I mean, I always look forward, and I hardly speak to him now. I mean, because of work, and he's retired. But whenever we do the exchange of information and how the way he looks at things, it was. I mean, he was basically the very first person I met when I came over to Australia, and then was very intimidated, but. Yeah, I think, and I was always telling him that after I finished my PhD, like I've always seen my supervisors as lifelong friends. So he's one. But you asked about really a role model. I guess I hope she doesn't see this clip. My office mate, a work colleague, her name's Jin Wu. I like how she goes about things, not really about work, because we work in the same field. But I really like how and admire how she deals with things like she knows when to switch off, and I struggle with that one. But she knows, and then I always admire that she's able to actually compartmentalize things. That's a very steep learning curve for me. But yeah, I mean, it's easy for me because we share an office. Yeah. So she doesn't know this. Okay, maybe you can edit this thing.
Well, those sound like incredibly admirable people. Researchers that, what always fascinated me about researchers is that, first of all, their ethic, the amount of work that goes into researching, that's the main part of it. But then there's the second part of it, which is translating that into text and writing it in a compelling and very, very organized manner. And there are some papers that I've read, not all the way through, to be perfectly frank with you, I don't have the time, but there are some research papers that I've read that are so well written that explain the data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative analysis. They explain the data in such a concise manner that whoever, whether they are an academic or just an everyman like myself, they can understand it. And that always fascinated me about some researchers. And it's a very unique skill set, I feel like, that not a lot of people recognize, because people think of research as purely just research. But you have to be a good writer too to be able to translate your work.
It's challenging, I think. Maybe because I'm used to basically writing because of the area that I research in, which is very technical. I struggle. I think I mentioned before that we wrote a piece in the conversation. That was difficult. Because the editor, she was very helpful and said, yes, I understand this. And but we need to make it mainstream, that a common person could actually pick it up and will be able to appreciate what you've actually done. It takes I think it takes a special skill to actually translate it. And to be honest, I don't have that because it's difficult. Because you're so used to, we have a particular audience to actually look at. For example, the journal publishers that we address, they have a very, very, like a formula. a definite formula. But if you really want to make sure that your research has impact in the broader community, you need to not really dumb it down, but I mean, maybe water down is a good way, but it's not because your audience will be nuanced, right?
Yeah.
But in the same vein, it has to be that they could understand and they could appreciate what you do. And I think it takes practice.
Yeah.
It takes practice to do that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll be able to, exercise that side of you. And at one point in time, hopefully you'll be able to get there.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. I'd love to see your name in some bylines. But yeah, now that we've gotten to know a bit more about you, we'll move on to the interview section. And for starters, I'd love to get your definition of air quality. What do you think air quality is?
Well, you have to distinguish, I think, air quality. So, if you're talking about outdoor, it's basically ensuring that there'll always be pollutants, that it's not harmful for us humans. And if it's indoor air quality, it's the same. It's the same basically that the pollutants you more or less. Do away with the pollutants indoors because it will affect basically your health and well-being as well.
And why is it important to pay attention to air quality in our homes, especially when it comes to health?
Well, because a lot of the pollutants basically we tend to ignore them. I think it's easier for pollutants if we can actually smell them, but more often than not, they're very, you don't smell them. It's important to actually make sure it's just basically for cleanliness and then ensuring that it's for health. And because more often than not, when you stay in a home, supposing not all of them would be of the same level of health. There will be some very sensitive, like especially if you have kids or somebody have prone to conditions like asthma. They would have a very different way of relating or perceiving basically the conditions at home. So essentially just ensuring that indoor air quality is good. Yeah.
And so what are some of the most common pollutants that we find in our homes that we don't necessarily realize are there?
Well, a very common thing, of course, there would be dust, and so dust would come in different kinds of sizes. More often than not, it will be say PM10 or PM2.5, the particulate matter, and sometimes we don't know them where they are because usually what's the issue is depending on how our homes are constructed or finished. Say carpets, for example, more often than not. I mean, walking through the carpet, your dust basically gets resuspended, and that's usually an issue. A common thing as well would be, this one's overlooked. I think it's the water vapor. You might think water vapor is just moisture, but it could actually be considered as a pollutant because it engenders other issues. Like if you have too much water vapor in your home or moisture in your home, then that means you have very high humidities. Once you have high humidities, then you get molds. So usually we would think that water vapor that's innocuous. It won't really be harmful, but it engenders other issues once you overlook that one. And what kind of dust as well, or pollutants as well. Well, CO2, carbon dioxide, it's not really harmful in the concentrations that we have at homes. But if it's too much, most studies would actually say that if it's say 10,000 parts per million and above, then it would cause drowsiness, or it could even that high level of concentration would cause consciousness. But as a gas itself, it's not really harmful. Other pollutants that we could think of, well, if we have cooktops, like gas cooktops, so you get basically carbon monoxide or, and what else? Dust mites. Dust mites is very common, isn't it? Like, most papers would say that if you have 50% humidity, relative humidity at a certain temperature, I think it's about 18 to 20 degrees, then basically your dust mites would proliferate. They love that one. So, the conditions in the home goes hand in hand with the kind of pollutants that you have in the home. But very foremost is usually, for me, at least my take is the activities that we do at home. There are sources, like what I say, the water vapor or even cooking. So when you cook, even simple thing as toast, when you toast, depending on what kind of toast you want.
Yeah. And with the carbon dioxide, I know you mentioned that typically in the concentrations that we have in our homes, it's not very harmful. But if there is a high concentration, it can lead to us feeling drowsy. But are there scenarios in which the concentration of carbon dioxide can actually get up to a higher level?
Well, it depends on how you actually ventilate your home. More often than not, it was highlighted particularly during the pandemic, is that they, because carbon dioxide is not really harmful, they use it actually as a surrogate for looking at how well your home is ventilated. So normally most standards and guidelines would actually say that your home should be, as you measure them, it's about 1,000 parts per million, because the assumption is what we have outside. Well, Australia is pretty clean. Normally the assumption of carbon dioxide outside is about 400 parts per million. So if you have 1,000 parts per million at home, and then you deduct whatever is outside, then you basically have 600 parts per million, which is considered more or less good air quality. So generally, I think as long as we keep our CO2 or concentration levels between 600 to I think 1,500, because 1,500, if you deduct from outside, it's still about 1,000. It's still relatively okay. More or less, that's the threshold.
And is there a way to measure this at home?
Well, now it's pretty common now. Previously, before COVID happened, and then we were doing studies in schools, we would get sensors. I mean, nowadays, because of what happened with COVID, you can get them at Amazon. You don't have to actually get a very a laboratory grade instrument. Just enough to actually look at a good enough sensor to actually monitor your home.
Yeah, the general
conditions.
Ballpark.
Yeah, and a lot of household nowadays would normally have, at least the ones that I know, would have sensors. And then because of what happened, and then readings that they have, as soon as we see 1,000 parts per million, they open the windows. So I think any sensor would be good, because you're not doing it basically for research. It's just for monitoring your home.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting and very helpful to know for sure. So with that in mind, what exactly is air circulation, especially in the context of homes?
Air circulation is essentially ensuring that there's enough air changes of the air inside your home. So generally, during COVID, the World Health Organization was actually saying that to have a very good indoor air quality, you need to have 6 air changes per hour in the home. And you can't have that. It's very difficult to achieve that unless you have mechanical ventilation. Even when you open your window, and if there's not much air, for example, it's not windy, you won't really have that much circulation. So in terms of ventilation or circulation in the home, it's just ensuring basically that you have sort of like, refresh the air in your home, or freshen up the air in your home.
And what's the best way to do that?
For one, I think just ensuring that you know basically what activities in your home would generate that kind of sort of the pollutants. For example, even typically, I mentioned earlier about water vapor. So maybe when you're showering, for example, ensure that you actually have an exhaust fan in your bathrooms. And the trick, I think, is, or a very good tip is, don't turn on your exhaust fan when you're already showering, because some actually homes are fitted with humidity sensors in their toilets, so which is just actually linked to the exhaust fan. So once the humidity reaches a certain level, depending on how you set it, then that's the only time that the exhaust fan would actually run. But I think for ensuring of a proper operation, it would be best if you could actually switch it on and off, and then before even the moisture producing activity happens, you already switch it on, and then it somehow it's already primed to actually take out the moisture. So moisture is a good is a primary thing. But every so often, I think you could open the windows. But again, it depends on what the condition is outside. Supposing if it's raining or noisy or traffic, depending on the location of your home. Sometimes you don't have that option. So a very good thing is really to just have ventilation. I think bare minimum, your toilets, your kitchen, so you should have a range hood. Even your laundry cupboards. Your laundry cupboard should have a extraction fan, because as soon as you open basically your washing machine, there'll be moisture in there.
Yeah. And so apart from the bare minimum practices that you just mentioned, what intermediate practices would you recommend doing? Maybe would it be like installing indoor fans or?
For air circulation? Well, it depends, I guess, on what on what you do it. Because I think I think us as basically home occupiers, we need to appreciate what actually happens in how we use our homes. Because that's the thing, isn't it? Like when you get a home or you rent a home or you buy a home, it doesn't come with a manual on how to use it. You just do your activities. If you're mindful of what happens in a certain activities or certain activities that you do, then I think you'd be able to actually control on how to use your home. And I think in terms of indoor air quality is it could be as simple as I guess fans you could provide, but you just have to be mindful. Most of us are fitted with air conditioner, but our air conditioner is just basically for treating of air. So just basically, if it's too hot outside, you basically cool your space. If it's too cold outside, you basically heat your space. And that's what our air conditioning system works. But most typical installation of air conditioning at home, it doesn't come with actually ventilation. You basically the air within your home is just being recirculated. So I guess one of those a good thing is having a fan, like the stand fan, or just to make sure there's air movement. But just be mindful, you're only moving the air within the space. Every so often, you'd actually have to open your windows, and or depending on how favorable your location would be, because at the end of the day, outdoor air needs to basically refreshen your space. And there's always a lot of studies basically show that our indoor air is actually even worse than our outdoor air.
Oh,
Depending on the location. Supposing if your location is within a heavy traffic area, say for example, trucks basically go in there, definitely it would have. But the thing is, if a worse condition outside goes inside the home, our activities actually makes it worse. Depending. So I guess it's just being mindful of what you generate at home.
Yeah, that is actually really quite surprising to me as someone who is not an expert in air quality by any means. This is definitely all new information to me. There was a period of time when, like, briefly before I started reading a bit more about managing my household, and a little bit after I moved out of my parents' house for the first time, I just hated switching the range hood on so much because it made such a loud noise. So for people who do get affected by the loud sounds of the range hood and the ventilating fan thing in the bathroom, what would you recommend doing?
Well, I guess if you own your own home, it's easy to actually replace them, for example. And then there's quite a number of very good models now, like even for your extractor fans or your exhaust fans for your toilets. They're tiny, usually about 30 by 30 centimeters. There's actually silent models, even for the range hood. Of course, you pay, there's a cost imperative to it. But of course, if you own your own home, then it's quite easy to replace those. But if you're renting, that's again a different scenario, because you pretty much don't have a way of changing it without a cost. But I think for me, I think it's you have to look at the value proposition of you don't turn it on, you get pollutants, you get moisture, then you get molds.
Yeah.
So and so usually what I do is that because it's noisy, like it's really noisy depending on what you have. You get used to it, I guess. Usually before I start cooking, I will turn on my range hood, and then after I cook, I leave it for about say 5-10 minutes, just to more or less have an idea of depending on what I cook.
Yeah.
And then for the bathroom, just I think normally it's like practice.
Yeah.
The more regularly you do things, make it to a habit, you get used to it. And somehow you can have a very good tendency to drown out the noise.
Yeah, or maybe just get a good set of earplugs. Would that work?
It would, but then you're going through other activities. I'd rather that maybe you distract yourself with other activities.
Yeah, I can't seem to do that for some reason. So maybe I will try and get some earplugs. Just a random idea I had there because I'm renting and I can switch it out.
But then, I mean, if you cook twice a day or 3 times a day, take a bath, once a day or twice a day, shower. You'd be wearing earplugs all the time.
Well, for that, for that specific activity, I would try and group a few of the meals together into one cooking session, and then I won't have to do it multiple times a day. But yeah, and apart from that, there are some people out there who are more sensitive to these sounds than I am. I know that for sure. So maybe earplugs would
but the thing is, like, for example, a typical activity is even dishwashing produce moisture. And I think in terms of managing really the quality of the home, at least for homes, even our breathing, the way we breathe, we are actually expending moisture. So our homes are actually just packed with moisture, water vapor, especially if you're not opening your windows. And most of our homes are now built basically airtight. If it's not constructed properly, that you don't have a mechanical ventilation, then basically that's why you have this stuffy smell. So I think it's really more about the practice. Now, it would be very good if our homes are built, with the occupant in mind, that, making sure that you have very good specifications for your range hood, for your exhaust fans. That will go a long way, I think. But our practices basically tend to make our conditions in our home worse than what is outside.
Yeah. And with range hoods, most of them now come with a few levels. So there's like a lower setting and there's a higher setting. So do you have any guidelines or ideas on when to use which setting?
Well, if I'm boiling water, for example, or have the kettle, because the kettle would be there, which is basically an electric kettle, I know that I would put it in a high setting. But I guess it depends on how much would come out from your. Because you normally put a lid anyway on your cookware. But see, that's the thing. As soon as you lift the lid, and depending on what you're cooking or maybe heating or steaming, there's always going to be moisture, and the telltale sign is like some moisture coming out of it. And and then because the thing is, if you don't do that extraction fan, for example, even for showering, moisture always comes, especially now in winter. A lot of the moisture, you don't see them, but they would normally adhere to the coldest part of or coldest surface of the room. That's why you see the condensation in mirrors. And once you see that, you know fully well that you're not actually extracting the moisture properly. Now, if most of our walls are also constructed with gypsum board, and gypsum board is very porous. So even if you wipe it down, and suppose accumulation of that moisture, it could actually be inside. Then if it develops into mold, it's very difficult now to actually address.
Yeah, I do notice that sometimes, even when I have my exhaust fan on, even if I've switched it on far before I start showering, when I step out of the shower, I do notice that sometimes there is condensation on the mirror regardless. So is there any solution for that?
See, that's the thing. Maybe the extraction fan wasn't doing its job properly. So it's usually sometimes it's the construction as well. So usually what I would normally tell most of my friends, and how do we do this? How do I monitor this? I think bare minimum, you don't even have to have a CO2 concentration CO2 meter. Even just a typical temperature and humidity sensor, because humidity is relative humidity sense is a very good barometer as well as what's happening in the moisture in your home. And every so often maybe and I think it's very difficult in our homes because like we work, right? And then you can't leave your homes open, otherwise it's a trouble, just basically waiting to happen. So
I have a cat too, so that's really going to be a lot of trouble.
So we tend to actually close it up, and as soon as you go home, most likely it's actually accumulated in there, like stuffy. So I think it's good practice as well to just open basically a window, or have for example extractor fan with your activity. Now, I come from a tropical country. Now, normally before, I didn't understand it then. But generally, because it's so warm outside, and then if you take a shower, for example, a hot shower, it would normally have condensation. So molds are usually issues in a lot of tropical countries tropical countries. So usually a very good idea would be, depending on, of course, on where you are placed, is if you're having a shower, for example, especially in apartments, it's always a good idea to have your air conditioning on dry bulb mode. Because it basically, in Singapore, for example, a very good idea with a lot of those apartments is at least for a couple of hours, not more than that. If somebody does some moisture generating activity, they, especially like in the shower, they would normally have the air conditioning on. Because it's very humid in Singapore, right? So basically, have it on dry mode.
Yeah.
So it's, somehow it lowers down the humidity.
Yeah. I'm actually from Singapore, and I can like attest to it, but it's not just for showers. It's most of the time because it's that humid.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely an idea of what we can do just to take a page out of Singaporeans who have the most experience with humidity.
Yeah.
And so with this issue, do dehumidifiers help with that at all?
I think they do, but really worst conditions, I would recommend having a dehumidifier. I think you would know, for example, in Singapore, even in Hong Kong, some hotels, even in their corridors, they actually have dehumidifiers. You just have to be mindful that every so often you actually take out the water that's being collected. I guess it does work, and we have a lot of appliance now or equipment that can actually combine having a dehumidifier with a fan. But if you don't have one, just having basically air circulation within your space, you have a stand fan on when you're, they say, showers as soon as you open basically your toilet, or at least you have and having a window open, which is not very good when it's very cold outside, but as long as you basically extract.
Right. And the thing is that we can always crack just the window a little bit open, and even if it's cold, we can always layer up, but we can't easily just remove mold.
Yes, and especially if it's behind all of our say walls, particularly they call them interstitial molds. It's very difficult to get rid of them, especially in our floorboards or even carpet underneath. So if it's visible, you could easily wash them, right? You just have to be mindful that make sure the spores are not left, because otherwise they generate again.
Yeah. And when it comes to air quality and air pollution in the home, what are some intermediate practices that we can do, or things that we can integrate into our home? Will air purifiers help at all?
Well, they do, and then I think a number of I don't have a air purifier at home, but a couple of friends basically, because they have very sensitive kids, and then they said it does help, particularly with the dust. the air purifier. Somehow it lessens the dust. I guess it does help. Air purifier would work, but there are other things that they said about the UV filters would actually be good as well. But I don't have experience with the UV filters. But there's a researcher basically in RMIT who was saying that you just have to be mindful because sometimes UV filters, for example, could also have other consequences. For example, like increasing, from my recollection, basically, for example, having something to do with the ozone as well. There are other pollutants that basically gets affected.
Okay.
So, but UV filter seems to be something not really would be useful, for example, of an object, and you put it basically in a UV filter and then it cleans it out. But I'm not sure in terms of the application on a bigger scale. Although I've read papers wherein they've actually used it some operating theaters in hospitals. So I guess it depends on the kind of a setup. I'm not very familiar with the system.
Yeah. So what exactly is it that UV filters aim to solve?
So I think it targets a certain, say maybe pollutants in terms of basically maybe proliferating or generating. I'm not really exactly sure in terms of what the actual thing that it does. It just seems like I know that they sell them in little boxes that you can, if you want to clean, for example, your phone or your eyeglasses, you just put it in and it's under the UV rays or something.
Yeah. And so with all of the things that you've shared with us today, what are the main challenges or limitations of improving air quality at home that our listeners should pay attention to?
I think for one is really being familiar of how your home is constructed or built, because it depends, of course. I mean, you may live in a double brick home. It has a very different way of managing the conditions at home. Or if you live in a precast a home, it has a different way again. So I guess really knowing how your building is constructed or built, the kind of we call it the building envelope of the building fabric, be able to give you an idea on how I'm going to manage my practices in living in this home. I think there's also a difference between if you have a standalone home, like a house, compared to an apartment, for example. Because apartment, you have basically, you only content, more often than not, you contend with just one wall that's facing outside, right? And all the others are party walls between your neighbors. It also has a different way of managing how to actually use that home.
Yeah, for sure. There's not much of depending on what kind of apartment that you live in as well, and what buildings are across the road from you, there can be a lot of difference in the way you treat your home with the air quality. So are there any emerging technologies in the field that address air quality concerns that you think would come up sometime soon?
Well, this one, it's not really a new one, but it still hasn't really there's not much uptake in it. But there's also this push, even in our building code, there's also this push that making sure that when we build our homes, it's really airtight. Because we always go with, build tight, but ventilate right. Basically, that's the thing. So they want to make sure that you have very airtight home, but making sure that you also have the facility or the equipment to actually ventilate your home. And when I say it's airtight, really good building envelope, like insulation, because once you insulation, you're able to control basically the condition in your home. Or even now, I think our windows, I think it's not so expensive anymore compared to 15 years ago. We can have double glazed windows now. So really making sure, if it's really built properly, at least you won't get condensation if you're double glazed windows. If you live in an old apartment or an old home wherein you only have single glazed, it's very difficult to actually manage. So I guess in terms of managing, really knowing what kind of home you have or how it's built, and then you can tailor your practices accordingly.
And what do you see or hope to see in the future of home air quality? Would it be apartment buildings and homes being constructed in a more intuitive manner that prioritizes air quality? Or, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, our building code, at least our national construction code, both for commercial building and for residential, they've always addressed indoor air quality as an amenity. So somehow it's always been addressed. But the thing is, sometimes there's always this thing that you balance between thermal efficiency of the home. I mean, that's basically a priority in our construction code and standards. Somehow that balance between, okay, I have a thermally efficient home, I mean, it doesn't consume much energy, but it shouldn't be at the expense of making sure that you have, the health and well-being in your home. It is a challenge. And I think that will be pretty much addressed. Like with the new building code we had in 2022, which only became more or less taken on board by the different states in 2023, and we'll have a new one again in 2025. Somehow they came up with supporting standards or guidelines for it. So indoor air quality is one of them. There's actually an indoor air quality handbook. I mean, it's not perfect, but at least it gives designers, the people who design our homes or people who construct our homes, an idea on exactly how are we going to deliver this to our home, our occupiers, basically.
Yeah. And that's pretty much up to the discretion of designers to take it as, would it be a priority to include in the design, or?
It would be. I think especially now what happened to us in the last 4 years, I think most of us are basically pretty cluey in terms of, okay, what's good for our, for indoor air quality in homes. So I think, I think you'd be surprised that a number of my friends who are architects, practicing architects, they said most of their clients are actually know what questions to ask now in terms of, okay, if I do the specification, how do I manage my home? And then if I'm going to spend this much, is it going to give me a very healthy home? Mm-hmm. So I think there's this issue because there's always going to be a tension, I think, between keeping energy, how we run our homes, with how to make sure that we're healthy in our homes.
Yeah. That's great to hear, and hopefully we'll get to see more of this applied in newer buildings, newer designs, sometime in the future. Now we're moving on to the practices and habits section. This is where we ask you a little bit about the everyday application of air quality, air circulation, and air pollution. And my first question for you is, what is a practice that you do to manage air quality in your home?
My personal practices.
Yeah.
Well, for one, maybe because I'm always mindful of it. It's basically like what I said earlier, that as soon as I know that I'm going to generate moisture, like cooking, taking a shower, even just taking my laundry out of my washing machine, the fans are already on. And even as soon as I come home, because you're home from work, your house or your flat, as I live in a flat, is essentially hermetically sealed. It's sealed because you close basically everything for security. And as soon as I go home, I open my sliding door. I'm lucky now because I'm facing east. I'm open my sliding door, and then depending on what I smell, then I turn on my extraction fan. But it's basically that. And I guess just being mindful of if I see, for example, leaks or a condensation, so in the mirror, I basically wipe them down immediately. I don't let them accumulate. I think it's just that. I think for me, I'm obsessed with moisture, because I know that's the one that usually causes problems.
Yeah.
I'm not so worried about the dust because I vacuum regularly. Yeah. So, but for me, it's just the moisture.
Yeah, and that's the one that's going to be costly too if you let it build up for too long.
And that's the thing. You can't really view moisture as a pollutant, but I think it basically leads to pollutants.
Yeah, it might as well be
considered as a pollutant.
Yeah. I never thought that. I'm just having a flashback at the moment to being a child, and I never ever thought that as an adult I would be afraid of moisture.
No, I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
And a very good advice as well is that I think have sensors in your home. I mean, most of us, you can just buy it from an office supply, even as a very simple temperature and humidity gauge. So at least you know. But typically, at least you know if you're going to turn your heater on or you're going to turn it off or something. But that's a very good gauge.
Yeah.
Because it's easy. You can see the relative humidity go up. I said, I better turn something on. CO2 sensors are very good. But for me, even just the relative humidity is fine. Because maybe just because of the way I use because I love indoor plants. They said some indoor plants is very good for indoor air quality, but yes, it's good as a standalone. Most experiments, they do it in a laboratory, but you need probably a lot of those plants in your home. If you have a tiny home or a flat, you can't afford to have basically plants everywhere. So it depends on what you have at home. Like for me, I tend to balance between what do I like, the temperature or the relative humidity, because some plants like humidity. So give or take, for example, like in summer, they would say, you have to draw your blinds down to control the thermal environment because it's too hot outside. You lessen basically the use of your air conditioning system. Now, if I do that, my plants will suffer. So give or take. Maybe don't put the blinds too low. Yeah. Just have enough light to basically block have enough of the sunshade to block the heat coming in. But at least everybody gets to be happy, including your plants at home.
Or maybe even having designated windows of the day, designated times of the day where you have the blinds up when it's not too hot early in the morning. Yeah. And then the afternoon you can have the blinds down.
Yeah.
And that will also really help with the post lunchtime, slump that we usually get, and the heat doesn't help.
But the thing is, though, I think it's like we talk about practices at home. We talk about the thermal environment at home. I think just being mindful. I know being in Melbourne, we're always so particular about the weather. What's going to be the condition the following day? We always check, right? Compared to other cities, I think in Australia, Victorians or in Melbourne, we're so obsessed with weather. So I think knowing that, though, you can manage how the condition in your home would be, because temperature and moisture and humidity, they go hand in hand. So if you know it's going to be a hot day, don't wait for the peak maximum temperature to happen. At early in the morning, you can already draw down your blinds a little bit. Turn the fan on. You reduce basically your air conditioning to work hard later that day, but at least you actually control the moisture as well in the space.
Yeah, it sounds like a really cost-effective combination of practices to do as well in a way that doesn't require you to add an air purifier or to find a dehumidifier on the market. So I really appreciate you sharing your personal practices with us. Now we'll move on to the open mic section, and this is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic at all. So the floor is yours. Please take it away.
What am I passionate about?
Yeah.
I just mentioned earlier Lego, right?
Feel free to talk about that.
The Lego. A very expensive hobby, though. I love it. Mm-hmm. I think the Lego sets, and it's very difficult. I think Lego is very cunning. They always come up with sets that your wish list basically grows longer and longer, and they're getting to be much more expensive. You just have to have considered decision that I'm not going to get that one. But what I'm passionate about, I guess, not related to work. Not much of a life, isn't it? Let's see. Books. I love nonfiction books and movies as well. It's also a very, very good thing because it could be expensive. You have 2 or 3 streaming things, and then there's going to be lots of movies coming on. But Not really much. Oh, I do love photography.
Oh, you do? What kind of photography?
I tend to actually do most architecture and travel photos and street photography, but not people, because I'm very careful about I was gonna say shooting people, taking pictures of people, but yeah, I do photography. I'm a stock Getty image contributor.
Amazing.
It's been a while since I put together my portfolio because of job. But before, I do. I won't really say I'm professional, but maybe semi-professional.
Yeah.
You have your own gear and whole bit. But it's been a while since I've done.
It's actually one of my dreams to be an architectural photographer. Do you have a profile with your works at all?
Well, it's most of them. Yes, it's architecture, but I'm with Getty Images, and of course, everybody has a Flickr or a 500 PX. So I mean, to be honest, I haven't been updating the photos. I think in my Flickr account, the last photo I took was when I went to Hong Kong. 2014, and then that was my last one. Yeah. But I have other photos which are basically because I don't shoot in JPEG, I shoot in RAW, and then I basically post process, not too much. I post process my photos in Lightroom, and then choose pictures basically to upload to Getty Images, and if they like it, and then they post it basically, or just for personal thing, I put it up on Flickr, and then you get to see a network of people wanting to know what setting you used for your pictures. But I tend to like landscapes and architectural photos.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we will see you come out with more works at some point. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today. It was such an insightful conversation. Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with? Any last few pieces of advice or takeaways that our listeners can really benefit from when it comes to air quality?
Well, for one, really getting to know your home, because it varies, of course, and then and the practices that you do have to actually tailor to how you use your home, without, of course, compromising the quiet enjoyment of your home. So I guess I think knowing really how your home works, and what it could offer you, would actually allow you to operate it more efficiently without compromising your health.
Yeah.
And not spending so much money in operating your home.
That is such good advice. Thank you for sharing that. And if our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go? My university webpage basically has the link and the contact details in there. And I think I have a LinkedIn page, which I think I gave you. Yeah, you did.
And then I mean, I'm not very good with social media, but generally, I mean, it's available in there. I mean, our school and the university is more or less up to date with our profiles anyway, so they could always contact the profile over there.
All right, amazing. We'll link those in the show notes. Thank you once again for joining us, and thank you everyone for tuning in to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast. We'll see you in the next episode.
You've been listening to On the House, produced by the Household Management Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at hm.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.